So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour through the world of LDES, globally focused, but I will try and dive back into the UK just for a bit more UK-specific context. So first of all, a little bit about us, the LDES Council, why we need LDES globally, some of our technologies, the families that we have, and then last but by no means least, what we think is needed in terms of policy and regulatory reform. I'm Director of Policy and Partnerships, so I do love to talk about policy. Of course, there are a wide range of other issues around LDES as well. So firstly, just to kick off, who are we? Who is the LDES Council? So we were formed in 2021 at COP26, get the numbers right, made up of a wide range of companies, 60 plus, really across the whole ecosystem, including technology providers, but also, as you can see, hopefully some of our anchor members and service providers, some of the really big names in the world of energy, including, of course, BP, who is speaking later on. We define LDES as the ability to discharge energy continuously for 8 hours or more. You will see different definitions around the world, but broadly speaking, they're in the same sort of ballpark. That does go up to days, even weeks, and the ability to store energy seasonally as well. So just to be clear, don't get too hung up on definitions, but that's where we put it. And just quickly, we're a member of the Global Renewables Alliance, who's the kind of umbrella organization of renewables bodies globally, including wind, solar, geothermal, hydropower, and green hydrogen, working very closely with the likes of IRENA to push for renewables on the global stage. You may have heard, if you're internationally focused at all, about the XXX campaign for 2030 to get 3 times as much renewables on the grid by 2030, and we played a key role in that. So the global need for storage and flexibility, hopefully this won't come as news to you if you know anything about the energy transition. In short, we need to massively increase the amount of electricity generation we have globally, and we need to stop generating with gas and coal, which means we're going to fill that space with wind and solar in the main, not exclusively, but in the main. That creates challenges on electricity grids. The wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, as we know. Sources of renewable generation aren't necessarily where sources of demand are, so offshore wind isn't quite obviously located next to factories or cities or what have you. So we need to make sure that there is real system flexibility. I won't go into super detail on this curve. This has been done by a US agency. Others come up with similar numbers. The important point to note is, as you have more and more wind and solar, as you rely more and more on wind and solar, the need for your duration of your stored energy increases, and it really starts to ramp up at about 60 to 70%. So as we start to get 70, 80, 90% of electricity coming from these sources of variable sources, we need to be able to store it for longer and longer periods. So that's why we need these different types of technology over and above lithium ion, which is great, but is a short-term or short duration technology. Quickly on the headline numbers globally. So what do we think the overall market for LDES could look like? So we did some analysis with McKinsey a couple of years ago. Up to 8 terawatts by 2040 could be needed on the lowest cost pathway to net zero. These are global numbers. I mean, those numbers are huge, by the way, if you don't know energy. You know, the total amount of electricity capacity generation today is about 8 terawatts, for example, globally. So that 8 terawatts figure is split about 5 on thermal and about 3 on power. And crucially, this is how much it could save the world in the energy system, up to $540 billion US dollars per year in that scenario. Huge potential, and also huge carbon savings. As we heard earlier, the whole reason for doing this is in the main to tackle climate change with additional energy security benefits as well. So what are the technologies? What are those members that I showed you earlier? What types of technologies do they do? So we split it into 4 families. Mechanical, this will include things like pump storage hydropower, very widely deployed globally, over 170 gigawatts. Compressed air, already at the commercial stage, and a range of other technologies that store potential kinetic energy. Thermal storage, this is really important. Thermal storage has huge potential. This is storing electricity in the form of heat. It can be in something like molten salts, it can be in bricks, it can be in cement. There's a whole range of storage mediums. Huge potential, and I will briefly touch on that in a moment. Chemical storage, I'm sure you're all familiar with things like hydrogen, storing energy in the form of bonds, chemical bonds, and then electrochemical, so batteries. As well as lithium-ion, there are a bunch of other types of battery chemistries, all of which have slightly different use cases and are suited for different types of durations. So I mentioned thermal, and this, I say this just having come from an electricity and a power background, I underappreciated the need for heat solutions globally. I'm not going to run through all of these. This information is available on our website, but I mean, just to pick some of these things out, around 20% of global carbon emissions are from heat used in industrial processes. With today's technology in thermal storage, so I'm thinking particularly about 100 to 500 degrees Celsius heat, we can deliver. The technologies are available now. We do need some reforms to things like grid fees to really unlock that and enable it, but the technology is there today. It's been built around the world. Sites in Europe, and particularly in the food sector in the States, are already going down this route. So really important from a decarbonisation perspective, and I can't say it enough, available today. But, and this is where my pet area of interest is, if these technologies are so great, if they offer such wonderful benefits and a superb rationale, why haven't they been built at scale? In the main, it's because the electricity markets aren't really structured in a way to reward their flexibility and to provide those signals to investors that I'm sure you ought to see. In particular, long-term revenue visibility. We need that for offshore wind, we need that for transmission infrastructure, we also need it for LDES. There are a few other bits and pieces which are relevant to LDES where we are working with regulators and so on to address around things like reference technologies and so on. But in the main, it's electricity market reform that's needed, and you see it in the UK with the cap on the floor. Speaking of which, I think maybe you will be familiar with it. I don't know how familiar you are with the LDES reforms in Britain. I'm not going to go through this all in detail, but essentially the idea is if you get a cap on floor contract, and the first contracts are planned to be awarded in 2025, you will be provided with a minimum floor price. So you will trade in the market, the electricity market, and if you fail to meet that floor revenue over a period of time to be determined, you will get a top-up essentially from the consumer. On the flip side, if you go up to the cap and if you go above the cap, you'll need to return some of that money to the consumer. It's a good way of incentivizing, we think, deployment. A lot of work still to be done on the detail, but it's a great signal coming from the UK. And I won't go through the rest of the world, but just quickly to note, in the EU, again, the kind of key point here is you might be familiar with the EU's new electricity market design. That will come into effect in publication in the official journal later on this year. It will require member states to undertake what's called a flexibility assessment. Part of that, they will need to set out an indicative target for what they call non-fossil flexibility. So we expect to see, as a result of that, member states setting out how they are going to meet their flexibility needs, setting energy storage targets, and within that we would expect to see space for LDES as well. Last but by no means least, just a quick run through of what different governments around the world are either investing or supporting LDES. We're seeing a lot in the private sector. I think we saw over $4 billion last year in various types of private sector LDES investments. And at the multilateral level, so the International Energy Agency, their ministerial outcome document in February talked about the need for global targets on storage. Just a couple of weeks ago at the G7, again, the energy ministers, their communique called for 1.5 terawatts of power storage by 2030. Again, if you know electricity, that's a huge number just to be aware of. And we're working with partners in this space and with the likes of the Clean Energy Ministerial really to help shape the narrative. So I think that's it from me. If you need to get in contact, please drop me a line. If you want to get in contact with any of our companies or to hear more, I'm more than welcome to connect. And of course, we have our reports, as you'd expect, on the website. And coming up later this year, we'll have some updated costs benchmarking. So thank you very much for your time.